Imagine a queen so powerful that the entire kingdom bowed at her feet. But behind the golden gates of the palace, she carried a secret, one that could shake the throne forever. What happens when a queen falls for a man far beneath her royal status? Would love conquer all, or would betrayal bring everything crashing down? Watch till the end to find out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. This story will leave you speechless. Queen Isabella sat on the grand balcony of her palace, watching the city lights flicker like tiny fireflies in the night. Lagos was alive, cars honking, music blasting, people laughing. But inside the palace, silence swallowed everything. The weight of her crown pressed down on her, not just physically but emotionally. She had everything, a kingdom, wealth, power. Yet, she had nothing. Her husband, King Richard, had died in a tragic accident 2 years ago. Since then, she ruled alone. The ministers and elders constantly reminded her, a woman cannot rule without a man by her side. But she proved them wrong. She was fierce, intelligent, and unshakable. Still, there was one thing she couldn't control: her heart. Deep inside the royal kitchen, the aroma of grilled chicken, fried plantain, and spicy jollof rice filled the air. The palace cook, Daniel, moved swiftly, adding a dash of pepper to a steaming pot. He was tall, dark-skinned, and had a charming smile that could melt anyone's heart. Daniel was no ordinary cook. He had once been a chef in a 5-star restaurant before fate led him to the palace. Cooking was his passion, and though he served the queen, he never saw her until that night. Isabella, tired of eating alone in her grand dining hall, decided to visit the kitchen. She wanted something different. Not just food, but company. She stepped inside, her golden gown trailing behind her. The kitchen staff froze, bowing immediately. But Daniel, his hands covered in flowers, stood there, stunned. He had seen the queen from afar, but up close, she was breathtaking. "Your Majesty," Daniel said, his voice deep yet gentle. Isabella smiled. "I hear the kitchen makes the best jollof rice in Lagos. Is that true?" Daniel chuckled. "I can't promise the best, but I promise it will make you forget your worries." Something about the way he said it made her heart skip a beat. That night, Isabella sat on a stool in the kitchen, watching Daniel cook. She laughed at his jokes, asked about his life, and listened as he talked about his love for cooking. It was the first time in years she felt like a normal person, not a queen, not a ruler, just Isabella. Night after night, she found herself returning to the kitchen, drawn to Daniel's warmth. They talked about everything: life, dreams, even childhood memories. But soon, whispers spread through the palace. "The queen spends too much time with the cook," the palace guards murmured. "She smiles at him too much," the maids gossiped. The ministers noticed too, and they did not like it. One evening, as Daniel served her a plate of pounded yam and egusi soup, Isabella placed her hand on his. "Daniel," she whispered. He looked into her eyes, seeing something he never thought possible: love. "Your Majesty, this is dangerous," he said, though his heart beat wildly. "I don't care," she replied. For the first time in years, Isabella let her heart lead. That night, under the glow of the kitchen lights, she kissed Daniel. It was soft, hesitant, but full of longing. But love in a palace was never simple. Unbeknownst to them, someone was watching: Minister Jonathan, the most powerful man in the kingdom after the queen. Jonathan had always wanted Isabella to marry him, to make him king. But now, a common cook stood in his way. The next morning, Jonathan stormed into the royal court, demanding an urgent meeting. "The queen is disgracing the throne," he declared. "She is in love with a mere cook. This is unacceptable." Gasps filled the room. The elders nodded in agreement. "A queen must not mix with servants. We must stop this before it ruins the kingdom," another minister added. And so, they hatched a plan. That evening, as Isabella walked through the palace garden, enjoying the cool breeze, guards suddenly surrounded her. "Your Majesty," the head guard said, avoiding her eyes. "By order of the council, you are under arrest for betraying the royal bloodline." Her heart pounded. What nonsense is this? Jonathan stepped forward, smirking. "You broke the law, Your Majesty. A queen must not love a servant. You will be dethroned." Shock. Disbelief. Betrayal. The words hit Isabella like a thunderstorm. She looked around for help, but everyone she trusted had turned against her. "What have you done?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "You brought this upon yourself," Jonathan sneered. "By tomorrow, the entire kingdom will know that their queen is no longer fit to rule." As the guards dragged her away, Daniel stood in the shadows, fist clenched. He had promised to protect her. And he would. No matter the cost. Inside the cold palace dungeon, Isabella sat on the stone floor, her royal gown now stained with dust. The room smelled of damp earth, and the only source of light came from a small barred window. She hugged herself, shivering. This was not how she imagined her reign would end. Her crime. Falling in love. Above her, in the grand palace hall, Minister Jonathan stood before the council. "We must announce her removal at dawn," he declared. "The people must know that their queen has disgraced the throne." The elders nodded in agreement. "But what about the cook?" one of them asked. "He's the cause of this shame." Jonathan smirked. "Leave that to me. He won't live to see the morning." Daniel paced in his small palace quarters, his mind racing. He couldn't just stand by and watch Isabella be destroyed. He had to do something. Then, a knock. His friend, turned, a palace guard, slipped inside. "Daniel, they are coming for you," Turned whispered. "Jonathan has ordered your execution." A chill ran down Daniel's spine. "But I didn't." "It doesn't matter. You need to leave. Now." Daniel clenched his fists. He could run, save himself. But Isabella was still in that dungeon. He couldn't abandon her. "I'm not leaving without the queen," he said firmly. Thorn exhaled sharply. "You're mad. How do you plan to break her out?" Daniel didn't know yet. But one thing was certain, he would not let Isabella suffer alone. Midnight. The palace was quiet. Daniel, dressed in a guard's uniform Thorn had stolen for him, made his way toward the dungeon. His heart pounded with every step. Two guards stood outside the cell, chatting in hushed tones. "You hear? The queen is being exiled at dawn," one of them said. "Good. Let her go and never return," the other scoffed. Daniel gritted his teeth. He had to act fast. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small pouch filled with sleeping powder, an old trick he had learned from his grandmother. He stepped forward, smiling. "Minister Jonathan sent me to bring food for the prisoner," he said. The guards exchanged glances. At this time, Daniel shrugged. You know royals. They don't follow rules. The guards laughed and stepped aside. As he handed them the food, he subtly sprinkled the powder over it. Within minutes, they yawned, their heads drooping. One by one, they collapsed. Daniel wasted no time. He unlocked the cell and rushed inside. Isabella looked up, eyes swollen from crying. Daniel. He knelt before her. We have to go. Now. Weakly, she took his hand. How? No questions. Just trust me. And she did. They slipped out of the palace, moving through the back gardens. The city was still alive, people drinking at roadside bars, taxis honking, but they had no time to blend in. They needed a car. Ton had arranged for a driver to wait near the market square. They ran, dodging through narrow streets, their hearts pounding. Then, stop them. Jonathan's men spotted them. Gunshots rang out. People screamed, running in all directions. Daniel pulled Isabella behind a fruit stall as bullets shattered wooden crates. We'll never make it, she gasped. Daniel grabbed her hand. Yes, we will. Run. They darted through an alley, reaching the car. The driver, an old man named Babajide, threw open the door. Get in. They barely made it before the car screeched away, leaving the chaos behind. They drove for hours, finally stopping in a quiet neighborhood outside the city. Babajide led them into a small house. You'll be safe here, he said. For now. Daniel turned to Isabella. Are you okay? She nodded, but her eyes were filled with pain. I lost my kingdom, she whispered. Everything I worked for is gone. Daniel cupped her face. You haven't lost everything. You still have me. Tears welled in her eyes. But at what cost? He pulled her into his arms. We'll figure this out. Together. And for the first time since her arrest, Isabella allowed herself to hope. Back at the palace, Jonathan was furious. Find them, he roared. Search every corner of Lagos. He turned to the elders. We need to control the people before they start asking questions. We tell them the queen is dead. The elders gasped. Dead? Jonathan nodded. If they believe she is gone, they will forget her. And by the time we find her, she won't be alive to prove them wrong. A wicked smile spread across his face. The throne belongs to me now. Days passed. Daniel and Isabella hid, waiting for the right moment to fight back. Then, one morning, news spread like wildfire. Queen Isabella is dead. People mourned. Some celebrated. But Daniel knew the truth. It's time to take back what's yours, he told her. She nodded. But we can't do it alone. That night, they met with loyal allies, guards, former ministers, even commoners who still believed in her. If we expose Jonathan's lies, the people will turn against him, Tom said. But how? Isabella asked. Daniel smiled. By crashing his coronation. The palace was filled with guests. Jonathan stood before the crowd, wearing the royal robes. Today, we honor the memory of our late queen, he announced. And as her closest advisor, I will take the throne. The crowd clapped. Then. Stop. Gasps filled the air as Isabella stepped forward, alive and unbroken. Jonathan's face turned pale. "You're dead." She lifted her chin. "You lied to the people. You tried to steal my throne." Murmurs spread through the crowd. People looked at Jonathan with suspicion. "Lies," he shouted. "She is a traitor." Daniel stepped forward. "No, Jonathan. You are the traitor." Guards surrounded Jonathan, waiting for an order. But now, the crowd was turning. A woman stepped forward. "The queen was always kind to us. We won't let a liar rule us." Others joined in. "Bring back our queen. Jonathan must pay for his crimes." Jonathan panicked. He turned to the guards. "Arrest her." But the guards didn't move. They bowed. "Long live Queen Isabella." Jonathan was arrested. The kingdom rejoiced. And Isabella, once again, sat on the throne. But this time, she wasn't alone. As she stood on the palace balcony, looking at the people who cheered for her, Daniel stepped beside her. "Are you ready to rule again?" he asked. She smiled. "Only if you're by my side." He took her hand. "Always." And as they kissed under the bright city lights, the entire kingdom knew this was no ordinary love story. It was a love that defied tradition. A love that shook the kingdom. A love that won. Did this story surprise you? What would you do if you were in Isabella's place? Comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories.